Okay, so I'm Kathy. This talk is design patterns for working with humans, and it's not about UX design patterns. So I'm not going to talk about the front end. I'm going to talk about real life, human interactions, one-to-one, some common things situations have, so we can make some patterns that we can apply to new situations. But it's all about people. So if you really want to see something about UX design patterns, it's totally cool. You can absolutely leave. I'll close my eyes so I won't see you go. But that's what you're in for. And so, I'm really not going to take it personally if you're like, yeah, that's cool. I'll check on that later, but I'm going to go to another talk. So if you want to see the talk, on your own devices, you can go to bit.ly/human-patterns, and you'll see the slides. If you open it up in a web browser and you hit the S button, you can also see the speaker notes, and you can see what I'm seeing on my screen. If you go to bit.ly/human, oh, I forgot to start the recording. Hold on. They'll just miss out on that. So you can see the talk at bit.ly/human-patterns. You can see the Git repo at bit.ly/human-patterns-git. So if you want to fork it or make pull requests or whatever, you're welcome to it. So I'm Kathy Faze. I am YesCT on Drupal.org and YesCT on Twitter. I work for Blackmesh, and I am the Drupal community liaison, which means they pay me to do community stuff. And over the years, that's changed. Kind of in the beginning, it was work on Drupal 8. And then as we were hoping to release Drupal 8, it was do what you can to get Drupal 8 released. So then it was like work on criticals, and who cares what they are? Just get it done. And I travel a lot. I go to 14 work events a year. I go to different countries and different parts of North America. Blackmesh is a hosting company, and we do a really excellent job at customized support. And the reason why they hired me was because they get 60% of their business from hosting Drupal sites. And they listen to the message that people have been saying for years. If you own a company and you make money, and part of making money is using Drupal, then you should give back. And there's a lot of different ways of giving back. But one of the ways they wanted to give back was directly to fund somebody to work on Drupal. And so they did that, and I love my job. It's super awesome. As part of my job, working with the community, not only did I work on issues in Drupal 8, but I did a lot of mentoring, so onboarding people new to Drupal. So experienced people in technologies, maybe in other open source projects, but maybe new to Drupal. Go to a lot of events, talk to people that are business people and designers. And I formed a lot of relationships with a lot of people that I may not have met otherwise. And we ended up having a lot of conversations and events. The important conversations happen at lunch and dinner and after dinner, because you don't feel pressure to be professional and talking about technically, how do you make this Views plugin or whatever. It's kind of a more contemplative and reflective thing where you can talk about the greater effect that Drupal or technology is having in society and all kinds of things. Those conversations have informed this talk. Another thing which has informed this talk was a couple of years ago, I don't remember who it was, it might have been Eaton, but he retweeted some idea that somebody had, and it was try a social experiment on Twitter for 30 days, follow 20 people you've never followed before that are different than you in some way. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll try that. And I was like, well, how can people be different than me? A lot of different things. So where they live, their race, their socioeconomic status, their family life. Like, I was just like, I'm gonna follow different people, like, I don't know, designers. Like, what kind of world do they live in? And I did this for 30 days, and I unfollowed, I think, like 4 people after the 30 days, but I've kept most of the other ones. And one of the ways I picked was I looked for like lists of, important people, and I added different words to find these. And so I've had a lot of conversations with real people. I've tried to, on purpose, listen to people who are way different than me, and it's had an effect. And so the effect is kind of distilled into this talk. So originally this talk was a keynote for DrupalCamp Montreal. And so I was thinking, oh my God, I have to do a keynote. There's going to be like hundreds of people, if I'm lucky, 200 maybe. And they're going to be all different people. They're from a different country. It's all of the people at the camp in one room. And so I have to talk about something that's going to like appeal to all the people. And I was like, oh, I've seen some really great keynotes. And when I was writing this talk, I went back and rewatched some. I think it was the Wednesday keynote at New Orleans. I went back and rewatched that, and I was like, those people do amazing things, and they talk about these grand ideas. I'm like, what grand idea do I have that I feel like I have this captive audience? I've got CEOs and salespeople and project managers and developers and designers and people who are like, what's Drupal? And I have all these people, and I have a chance to like maybe affect them in some way. And so I thought about these years of conversations and this Twitter experiment, and I'm like, these people may have not had a similar situation. Maybe they don't travel as much, right? And they don't meet as many different people, and so they're kind of missing out on this opportunity to hear the things that people are talking about and the way that they're thinking about them. And so when they're faced with a difficult situation, what they have is their own experience to draw on, and they're missing out with having heard about difficult situations and how they worked out well or how they worked out awful, but because they haven't heard those stories, they're kind of entering into a difficult situation without as much peripheral experience that might help them deal with that situation better. And I'm like, well, maybe I can give like a little guide and be like, oh, you're in a tricky situation. I've heard about 100 tricky situations, and it turns out good ways of dealing with those share some things in common. So why don't we talk about those common things, look at some example situations, and then maybe when, after this half an hour and you go back into the world and you find yourself in this difficult situation, even though you haven't had the same, years of exposure and reading weird wacko blog posts, that you're still going to have the tools that'll help you deal with that in a good way. So what's a good way? So I think a good way is being intentional about the decisions that you're going to make and attempting to consider various outcomes and maybe trying to get to an end result where you're benefiting people. And just doing that, just before you have to make a decision, thinking about who is this going to affect? What are all the different kinds of people? If we choose this, how is it going to affect each of those different kinds of people? I went and saw the core conversation for theming, the theme system that Katzer and Lowry did at New Orleans, and they talked about using personas. And they did this really cool thing where they researched how other open source projects use personas, what personas they use, and what kind of decisions. And they tried doing things in other CMSs. And I thought that's a really good way of showing how personas, it's the same thing, but it's a technical problem. You can do the same thing with these kind of social problems. So one of the things that we can do when we have to make a decision is to start with that, to be like, okay, who are the people that I could affect with the result of this decision? Try and do super quick, what are they, what do they share, kind of get some groups of different types of personas, and then think about, well, if I make this, what's going to happen to these people, and what's going to happen to these people? that ties together with the idea of enriching people's communication with people that are not like you, so that when you sit down to think about the personas, you're not just thinking about different kinds of you, but you're like somebody completely different than me, right? And so that takes some practice, but it's one of the things that I think can really help, is just to start and be like, who are the different people? And how is our decisions that we make going to affect them? So there's kind of two ways of looking at this in general. There's like kind of an emergency situation, and there's a situation you can plan for. And I think in both of these, they share some similarities. But an example of a planning situation would be, this was one that she used in her keynote, was like making a health app, right? Like, that's not an emergency situation where you're like, oh my God, today in an hour, I'm going to have to make a health app. No, like you're gonna plan that out, right? Like months ahead. And so you can still use some of these ideas and patterns in that situation. And you're still going to want to think about people who are different and all the personas, and each choice that you make is part of making that project, how it's going to affect those people. So that still applies to that case. But there's also like emergency situations. Like somebody's just told me something I didn't expect to hear, and now I have to respond like right now to that. So if we look at those like instantaneous situations, I think a general pattern that works well is somebody comes up to you, or you get a message or something, and you're like, wow, I'm surprised, not sure what's happening, but I'm in some kind of position where I have to do something about this. So I think the first thing to do is to consider that the person sharing the information with you could be correct. And so as part of this general pattern that I'm going to propose to you, that's the first step. Like, just not admit they're correct. Like, not say it out loud. Just in your own head be like, it's possible that what they're telling me could be true. And I think it's a really important first step. And then the next step is to listen to that person without arguing and contradicting and making excuses, but really to listen to them. I've had a lot of practice listening to people. I mean, we all have, right? But like, I was trained as a counselor, and I read a lot of parenting books. And, I mean, a lot of ways of like active listening or all that stuff, right? But so what I mean when I say listen is be quiet. And when somebody tells you something, like breathe for a couple moments and see if they're done talking or not. And if they're not, they keep listening. And depending on the situation, this could take like 2 minutes or like half an hour or several days. I mean, really, right? You'll be able to tell, I promise. So then, right after you've taken some breaks and they really don't have anything more to say, try and say some things back to them that you heard. And you don't have to be like, what I hear you saying is that you're feeling anxious. No, don't do that. But like, repeat the details that they've given you. Try and make sure that if they referred to anything, that you got the reference correct. And when you do that, what they will get out of that situation is building a little bit of trust with you, and one of the things that they'll trust is that you are actually listening to what they're saying, whether or not you agree with them. Like, you're actually trying to hear what they're saying. So first, consider they're right. Next, actually listen, and wait a little bit and then repeat back. Then after that, think, what kind of time frame do I need to respond to them in? Do I have to handle this in 5 minutes? Can I take 3 days? Can I go talk to people? Can I go do some research and then get back to them? Think about what you think might be a reasonable response, and then tell them what you're thinking of doing. So somebody comes to you and tells you something, and you listen, and you're like, would it be okay if I got back to you tomorrow about this, sometime in the afternoon? I'll email you, or we'll set up a meeting. So communicate with them the time period of a response, what that response is going to be like, a phone call, a meeting, and that will help them too. Because then they don't have to freak out. They don't have to go home and be like, maybe I should email them again some extra information, or it's been 3 hours, why haven't they responded? And it'll just help everybody kind of chill out a little bit. So establish with them an okay period of wait time for everything to sink in. An hour, a couple days, whatever. And then, as somebody's coming to you because they think you can help, right? So you might be in some kind of position of power. I don't know what that power is. Influence, connections, a boss, a coworker, I don't know, something. And as that person who they're looking for help, and they could be presenting you with a new situation you're unfamiliar with, during that wait time, where you don't have to get back to them right away, what you can do is do research. So you can use Google, you can read articles, you can ask somebody else to read a book for you and tell you what it was about. You can talk to your friends in a private channel. You can go to a back channel that you're in and talk to a group of people. Like, you have a lot of things that you can do, which is research. And the important part of this is that it's not the person who's in the tricky situation. It's not the person who's bringing up the alert, who's doing the education. It's the people who have some kind of position where they can affect change. Probably also have more resources. And so during that wait time, the person who needs to make a choice can do research. So that's another kind of general step to do. And then go to your agreed upon communication, right? So you send them an email or you set up a meeting and you're like, so I looked into this, I found out this, I'm thinking of doing this, and then ask them, for feedback, general feedback, or you can say what would be the ideal outcome that you would see in this situation, and get their ideas. So this is the general pattern. This is my pattern for working with people that I'm going to propose. Considering that they're right, listening to them, communicating when your next conversation is going to be, during that wait time, doing independent research. And then after all of that, trying to actually change something to deal with the immediate situation, and perhaps change something systemic to make it less likely that a situation like that would happen again. Okay, so that's it. That's the pattern. Okay. I turned this talk upside down. If you do go look at the speaker notes, they might not make as much sense as they did when the talk was the other way around. But so when I was originally doing this talk, I started with examples. And I wrote just a ton of examples. There's a link to, I remember what I did. I copied and pasted the entire Google Doc into the speaker notes. So in case you want to see what the examples were, you can. There's no formatting, and it won't make any sense. So I wrote some of the examples, but I shared the Google Doc with a bunch of people. And I said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this talk, and I'm trying to come up with examples. Will you help me? And so people chimed in. Some people shared stories. Some people added more examples. Other people were like, Kathy, what the heck are you talking about? I don't understand the point. And all of this feedback was super helpful in making this. So let's look at some examples. There are a lot more that were in the doc. So if you want to talk about one and I don't mention it, go ahead and bring it up, because that'll be great. All right, so let's look at a couple different categories. Let's start with kind of the most removed interactions that you might have. So people that you don't know, you don't have an ongoing relationship with. These might be users of a product that you're making, readers of a blog post that you're writing, attendees that are coming in the room to hear you speak that you've never met before. So the pattern can still be applied here, especially when you're thinking about personas. So you think about who those people are, what you're going to build into your app, what you're going to write in your blog, what you're going to say out loud, and think about, like, if I say that, how's it going to affect this kind of person, and how's it going to affect that kind of person? So that's one way to apply this. Another situation could be that you're running an event. I go to a lot of events. I help organize events, and so I kind of feel passionate about event organization. And so this can apply to event planning also. So the thing is when you think about the personas, you think about the decisions you have to make, and you look at how it's going to affect all these people. If you visualize kind of those like categories, right, and you look at the cumulative effect for each of those personas, some of those are going to benefit those types of people, and some of them are going to hurt those kinds of people, and maybe be neutral with these people. So the criteria that you're using to make your decision might demand that you pick a solution that you know is going to negatively affect some people. So this pattern is not going to be like, I'm going to be able to do things and I'll never hurt anybody. No way, right? The difference, I think, with using something like this is that you know how you're going to hurt people. You know why you're making that choice. You have some chance to maybe mitigate that a little bit, but you're doing it intentionally. You're like, I know what the benefit, I am anticipating these benefits, and I'm anticipating these problems. I'm gonna do it because reasons. I mean, they're perfectly valid reasons. What's better about that is you have a chance to be prepared. It's not like you release an app into the world and somebody gives you some feedback and you're like, holy crap, I didn't think about that. I never thought about how that was going to affect somebody. I mean, it's more about intentionally making a choice that meets the criteria to benefit your project or your job or your own person, but also gives you a chance to mitigate some risks and perhaps make some changes that can lessen the bad things that will happen to other people. It's not going to eliminate them. Like, for example, right, if you have a limited budget and you look at the people and that you're going to affect, and you're like, wow, I would really like to improve, this area of accessibility that we have, but I don't have the budget to do all of the accessibility things, right? Which one am I going to do? And then you can look at the effect and be like, oh, okay, I can't help everybody, but I can be intentional about the choices that I'm making. Yeah, because you'll never get everything perfect, right? There's just too many things to think about. I mean, there's let's take events, right? So you have accessibility concerns, you've got mobility, audio, visual, language barriers, cultural differences. Some of the things you can do to mitigate that take time or money. Like, you can have extra signs, you can communicate in advance, you can actively welcome people, you can think about privacy concerns, and some of these things are easy wins. Like, instead of printing a badge and having a barcode which reveals all of your personal intimate details to anybody who wants to come by and scan you, you can be like, you can pick ahead of time what information you'd like on your badge. Maybe it's in your user profile on a website, or maybe you get to write your own badge and you get to pick what information you'd share with other people. And there's all these different things. But if you're planning an event for the first time and you've never done it and you haven't been to a lot of ones, you may not think, oh, I should worry about the privacy of my attendees. But when you kind of start to think about all of the different effects that you can have, then you have a better chance of anticipating some of these things and perhaps getting some things that are within your resources to do. So take session scheduling at an event. You have to do it anyway, right? So a little bit of planning in advance can make that come out really good. And I was talking with Peñasquito, Christian. He's from Spain, and they run a Spanish camp there. It's really good. And they literally use personas to schedule their sessions at events. So the way they categorize people is kind of like a matrix. They're like people new to technology, people a little familiar with technology, new to Drupal, like core contributors to Drupal, right? So they have like this gradient of experience with things. And then they have whether people speak English or Spanish or both. And they thought about this and they're like, you know what? We've done this a few times. It turns out if you live in Spain and you're new to technology, you probably only speak Spanish. And so they try and schedule these kind of like new to technology, new to Drupal things with Spanish speakers. And they're like, well, if you're like deep into like some migrate in Drupal, and you're going to go to like how to do custom migrations and write your own process plugins and things like that, odds are you probably have kind of high up in technology, you're familiar with it already, probably travel for your job a little bit, and as part of like being that deep into Drupal technology, you're going to be familiar with English, and so they try and schedule those sessions that are a little bit deeper in technology in English. But you could still be from Spain, but you'd probably speak both languages at that point. So instead of just being like, hey, we have Spanish and English speakers, and hey, we have, you know, deep in technology and new to technology, let's have some of both. They think about who those people are, and then they kind of match up to optimize the benefit that attendees are going to get out of this. And it really doesn't take them that much more time to schedule things like that than it does to just schedule things. It just takes a little bit of thought in advance about thinking about the choices that you're going to make and who you're going to affect with them. Let's look at another example. So subordinates, all right? That can mean a lot of different things. It can be work, it could be a club that you're in and you're like vice president and somebody else is new to the club. It can be a lot of different things. So the example that I like to think about, one of them, is recruiting. So you're kind of in a position of power. You're looking to recruit somebody, and you have some effect on that. So maybe you get to decide what the copy is of the posting. Maybe you get to do interviews. Maybe you get to make decisions about like final cut of people. So you're kind of in a position of power. But this is somebody that you could have a long-term relationship with. They're going to like join your group. So one of the things to do, one of the struggles that, like when I've talked to people who are doing recruiting, is they're like, you know what, we'd really like to increase the diversity of our group, but I can't because I have to pick the person who's most qualified for the job. And I'm like, okay, you haven't been on the internet for like 3 years. But I say that in my head. And I don't say it out loud, and I say, wow, that's a super tough situation. You can't win, right? You have this criteria, you're forced to, you have to like do what's best for the company, and maybe your shareholders, like you're legally responsible, right? To hire the best person at the least salary for the criteria that is make me money. And so they have to pick the person who's the most qualified. And so they're like, my hands are tied. And I'm like, well, actually, I should never say that word. There are some words you should never, ever say. Actually, just, I have a list. It's a lot easier when you're writing. It's much more difficult when you're talking to not say things you're not supposed to say. All right, so I'm talking to this person. I'm like, my hands are tied. I need to pick the person that's most qualified for the job. I'm like, okay, great. What we can do is we can change your pool of applicants. And they're like, well, how can I do that? Like, only white guys ever apply for my job. All right. So it turns out there's some really great tools out there. There's textio.com, which is like a subscription service. They have a free trial. It'll analyze your job posting, and it'll give you specific changes that you can make that'll make the pool of applicants better. you can change the definition of most qualified to include a factor like will help a group team come to better results. Like that can be on the qualifications for applying for things. Like your addition to the team will help improve the results that we get from this team. And when you start doing those two things, what you find out is you don't have to pick like the most technically qualified person. If you really care about the results of a project, then there's tons of research out there that shows that a diversified team is going to end up with better results. And so the best qualified person to join a team is the one that's going to help that team get better results. Not the one that meets like the 25 points of technical things that you could never meet, like 7 years of experience with Drupal 8. So there's some changes that we can make that allow people to still pick the best qualified person, but just approach it a little bit differently. So I like to talk about recruiting. Kind of cool. Yeah. So and there's lots of other situations that come up with people that that are kind of subordinates. You might be running a meeting, and people that work for you are attending it. You just have interactions with people, and in those cases, these things like consider they might be right, really listen to them, give a wait period, set up time expectations, and how you're going to communicate with them. Those all work really well in these situations also. Okay, so we'll get closer. So we start off with people you don't know, and then there's like people you kind of might have decision, like you might be able to affect, and then there's people kind of on your same level, so workmates. So in general, I think in situations like this, it helps to respect boundaries. So like do not disturb, or hours on the calendar that are blocked off. And respect separation of personal life and whatever your interaction is with them. So as part of a community group or as part of a job. Listening works really well in these situations also. And just giving time, opportunity, and a place for other people to speak. And that can mean a lot of different things, because you might be like, oh yeah, if I have a meeting, we should be like, okay, now what do you think? And then collect people's ideas and write them down in the notes so that they feel heard. And you might be like, yeah, I'm doing a totally awesome job of giving other people an opportunity to speak. But that's not how everybody speaks. Some people can't do that impromptu in a meeting, and they're uncomfortable putting their opinions out there like immediately. And so if you really want to give people an opportunity to speak, and you have the ability to do this, you can do things like collect feedback and allow the feedback to come back later. So somebody can go formulate their feedback and then turn it in. So maybe turn it in a private message, turn it in by adding it to a collaborative doc, turn it in at the next meeting. Like there's a lot of different ways for people to do that, but not everybody's going to be comfortable doing it in those situations. It might be on a topic that somebody's just learning. So they might want to go do a little research first. They could be having a conversation in a language that isn't their first language. So they might want to be careful about how they word something and need to like look up definitions of things. They might just not speak very well and feel more comfortable with writing things down. So when you're like, so in that case, right, those are like the different personas of people that you want to get information from, and you want to make sure that you're allowing them to be able to contribute. All right, so let's do next one. So people you don't know, people you are like your subordinates, your coworkers, and then there's like yourself. And I'm like, man, how can you think about how can you apply this pattern of decision making to yourself? It's really super hard. Because like, what are my personas? Like, okay, me. But there are different aspects of you, right? So like trying to figure out like there's your professional you, and the you that needs to maintain relationship with friends, and there's the you that interacts with the family. And those are not the same people. And so you can look at, well, if I make this decision, how's it going to affect this person? Right, this kind of me. And you can do the same thing. But finding examples of this, like I know in theory this is possible to do, but finding examples I struggled with. So I could use some help if anybody can think of some things. When I asked for some suggestions, like some people said, like, oh, you can make sure that you take breaks. You can think about your mind and your body and having a balance. You can not overcommit. You can pay attention to how other people are treating you. And I'm like, these are kind of down the right track, but I'm not totally sure how to mash this up with like the other situations, which are a little clearer for me. So if anybody has any ideas on kind of how to apply these like patterns, right? This consider, listen, wait, communicate, change. Yes, what's your name?
Andrew.
Andrew.
Perhaps an example.
Yes.
Right during this meeting, going through the whole risk reward, should I say this, what would be the repercussions, for example. When you brought up examples, I thought about speaking up, repeating the main points you made, saying I run into those situations, could I have a week or two to think about it and let me know if this stuff helped me, as kind of an example of that feedback that I was listening.
Dude, you've been paying attention!
But at the same time, I was thinking, what are the odds that I'll look like an idiot for saying that? She won't get the idea that as an example, is it worth speaking up? And I decided, I'm a big coward, so I'm not going to. And then it gave me the perfect opportunity. In my head, I was thinking, but if an opportunity arises, then I'll go ahead and do it. Is that?
That's great. I get it. I'm following you. It's, yeah. It's like risk rewards and looking at like, I'm about to do this. What's going to happen? What might I like about it? What might I not like about it? What can I do to mitigate it? So you did some mitigation in your example, right? So instead of just saying what you were thinking about saying, you framed it in a way that I couldn't miss your point at all. So you reduced your risk. Good job. Yeah, so any other thoughts on this yourself thing?
I do a lot of communicating.
Angie,
sorry. And lately about personal stuff that's been going on, so when I'm looking at that, I'm sort of like, okay, how, when you talked about separating yourself in your professional world and your family world, and your this.
Yeah.
It's helpful to think of it through those lenses. Like a simplistic example of this would be like if I post pictures of myself drinking on Facebook, how does that affect it when my boss looks at that?
Mm-hmm.
But just trying to think about how to, like there's different ways to write things. It's like I'm really angry about this, and I just want to get it all out. But then you have to think about like how is that going to present me and how I am to the world. What sort of image am I trying to cultivate of like how I handle conflict?
Yeah.
It's a little complicated because it's really hard to think about yourself without thinking about yourself and watching what others see.
Yeah, and like, should you even do that? I read this, I tweeted about it, it was a couple days ago. It was, so I follow Wired Ferret. She's from the northern Midwest. I met her at AlterConf in Chicago. And I was kind of familiar with some of her work before that. And then I followed her, and she wrote something about the way she was dressing. And in her blog post, she referenced this other blog post that she had read, which was like lady speaker dress problems. And I was like, and she referenced it. And I find that reading things that people are talking about, listening to talks and reading blog posts, like a lot of people have references. Oh, I need to add those to my talk. I don't. But when I hear like some similar things and I pay attention to the references, what I find is a lot of people kind of reference like some key source material that has been super influential. And sometimes it's worth going back and reading those key source things. So I was reading this thing about her like speaking, and she referenced this other post that this person had written. And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to read it. I'm going to read this source material. And one of the things that she mentioned was that she had decided that her personal style was going to be toddler grandma. And the definition of, she told about the origin of this phrase, and it was originally part of some like skit or something, and it was an insult to somebody. Like they had dressed a certain way, and they're like, "Oh, you're dressing toddler grandma." And she thought about it for a while, and she decided to kind of own it. And she's like, "Yeah, that's gonna be my style. I'm gonna be toddler grandma because I'm gonna dress for myself." And the thing about toddlers and grandmas, girls, right, toddler girls and grandmas, is that people don't judge them if they're not attractive to men. They don't expect toddlers to be attractive to men, and they don't expect grandmas to be attractive to men. And so, like, if you're one of those people, you have a lot more options, and you can do things for yourself. And but this is written by somebody who's kind of similar to me a little bit. She's in technology. She's about my same age, and she was like, you know what? I'm dressing for me, right? So she has to do that same thing that Angie was talking about. She has to be like, if I post a picture of myself at all, right? How is it going to affect what my boss thinks of me and my future job prospects and what my family thinks and my friends? And she came to the decision. She was like, I don't care. I'm going to be a toddler grandma. And so, like, you know, going through thinking about those different things doesn't mean that you're, like, every person is going to decide, yeah, I'm going to do the thing that's good for my job, right? Or I'm going to do the thing that's good for me. It's different, right? But I think thinking about them prepares you for some consequences and gives you, like, an opportunity to just make better decisions. And so I guess I'm in favor of thinking.
Dangerous statement.
What?
Dangerous statement in this political climate.
It's a dangerous statement in this political climate. Okay, good. Okay, so let's see. So my goal, right, if we go back to my goal, was that there are people that are connected to different people and have a lot of experience with tricky situations. And some of those people have shared experiences with that. They've written about it, they've talked about it, they've tweeted, blogged, given presentations about it. So there's a wealth of experience out there with difficult situations. But some people, because of the way their life demands on them or their social structure or the way they get information, they're not, like that stream of experience with these tricky situations isn't reaching those people. And I kind of find that those people tend to be the people who are capable of actually affecting change. And I find that frustrating. And so what I was hoping was, instead of like telling people what to do when your employee comes to you and says that in the lunchroom some guy made some sexist remark to them, like instead of telling, like using that as an example and being like, this is what you should do in that situation, because I have opinions. Instead, I thought, well, what I could do is kind of give people a general kind of pattern that they could do and trust, because I really believe it, that they can come to whatever is a decent situation in that difficult place. And if they use this kind of pattern, it would probably be a better result than a snap decision. And so my hope is that people who need to make a decision in a situation that's new to them can apply a general kind of pattern because it works in a lot of different situations, and then hopefully, right, the world will be a better place. So that's it. If you want to see the Git repo, it's at bit.ly/human-patterns-git. I want to say thanks to David, Levi, Jeff, Christian, Mark, Mike, Fury, Katie, Kalpana, David, different one, Alina, Roy, Damien, Greg, and Emma. And when I was writing this thank you slide, I thought back to something that I had talked to Katie about. I think she's a WordPress person. I met her, I think, at PHP Tech, and I met her last year at PHP World. So I had just seen her at PHP Tech this summer. And she was telling me that she gave a talk, and it was about how to thank people. And like, you know, be nice to people. And in her talk, she thanked some people. And after her talk, like, they yelled at her. They were like, how dare you bring up my name in public, and I didn't help you. Why are you thanking me? And what are you doing? And she was like, whoa, I was trying to be nice. It turns out some people are not comfortable being thanked, or they don't know how to say, you're welcome, or something like that, or they're nervous about some things. And so I was writing this slide, about how to deal with humans, right? Patterns of behavior that you can do, and I wanted to be thoughtful, and I had just heard this story, so I contacted all these people, and I was like, hey, I'm going to thank you in my talk. Is that okay? And they were like, yeah, it's totally fine. But I felt really good about that. It didn't take very much effort on my part at all, and they weren't surprised. They're not going to be surprised when they see this forked on GitHub or whatever. And they were cool with it. And if they had said, I'd rather not, I would have just taken the name off and eliminated perhaps some kind of personal rift that might have developed between somebody whose opinion I sought out, and I'm thankful that they helped me with that. So I used my own thing in my own talk. It's very bad. Oh, so that's it. So if anybody has any questions or thoughts, I don't know, when does the next session start? At 2:15. Yeah, so we have time for questions or thoughts. Or, Kathy, you're totally wrong. You didn't think about this persona. Yes, what's your name?
Jean.
Jeannie.
Just Jean.
Jean.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have a little trouble hearing, so I appreciate it. I'm going to interrupt you. I'm going to do a terrible job right now. I feel really strongly that people should call people by their names, and that we should pronounce them the way that people pronounce them themselves. So I really appreciate that you helped me with that, Jean.
Yeah. Jeannie is a family whole passive aggressive history thing. Okay, so I completely buy into all of this. But especially if I'm in a meeting and there might be historically contentious folks on the other side of the table. And you know how you always divide yourself up, right? You get a whole bunch of people on this table, and they're facing a whole bunch of people on the other side, so like the face-off.
Mm-hmm.
How do I train myself to literally close my mouth? Like, to even say, I need some time to think about that, and I get back to you, because the first thing that's bound to come out of my mouth probably isn't.
I share your problem.
Like, how do you, like, are there breathing exercises? Is there something you could do to be like, in the moment, this person is not a physical threat to me, they are presenting a problem that I really need to consider, or a viewpoint, like,
yeah.
in the moment, how do you?
So I think I like to be prepared.
Right.
So I quite often have my computer with me, and I really like Google Docs. Or I have my phone with me, and I like to text myself things to my Google Voice number, which ends up in my email, so I can search for it later. And I also tend to have a very small piece of paper and a pen. And when I have those tools available to me, I find that I do better in a situation like that. Because I don't have to say something out loud in order to remember it later or to tell it to somebody later. So, like, for example, I really wanted to listen to your entire question. But every 3 words that you said, I thought of something to say. And I think my thoughts are brilliant. Until I say them out loud, and I was like, oh. So instead, right, I made some notes. So I drew a circle, which is quick to do, and I wrote down like a couple of quick words so that I would remember them later, so that I could hear your entire thing. Try and listen. So I think like being prepared to do something with those things that you're gonna want to have come out of your mouth and put them somewhere else, I find helpful for me in those situations. I don't do so good with the counting and the thinking because I'm really afraid that I'm going to lose my thought. because they're ephemeral. I don't keep them around very long. I have to write them down, and I need to be able to search for them later, or I can't do anything. So that's how I deal with that. I don't know. Does anybody else have strategy for that situation?
It's helpful if you can try and assume that everyone has good intentions, even if their delivery is terrible.
Good point.
I deal with a lot of frustrated people in the community who yell at me because media sucks or whatever the problem is. And one way to react to that is to get very visceral and start attacking people. What have you done for Drupal Pro? Everything. It's not like that's wrong. It's like it is open source. It is social criticism. But trying to assume that that person who's yelling at you could become your biggest champion for what you want to accomplish if we're shown the pathway to get there is a really good way to look at it. Because I don't know what the standing conflict is between these two halves of the table. Maybe get some donuts, put them in the middle of the table, share that. But chances are if you all work at the same organization, you all have similar goals. Trying to find those common areas that you align on, and trying to find avenues we get into really visceral arguments about the dumbest stuff, whether or not it should be one underscore or a dot that separates these two things. Whatever, it doesn't matter. But if you can bring it back to the things that you agree on, and then you can find that common ground you all share, because we all at the end of the day want to educate students on whatever the thing is. And then try and find some ways of drilling down on that so you can work together on something you agree on. That's also build a foundation so that you get some more contentious stuff. It's not like you have some humanization.
Well, and again, I don't want to have this as any specific answer to them, but it's sort of like communication, a pattern of communication, especially organizations with a complicated hierarchy and
What about a shared Google Doc that's open the entire meeting and nobody speaks? All the meetings
Yeah. So I like what Angie said about assuming that it's possible that the person that's saying something that you feel like responding to does have good intentions. I think, well, maybe they're trying to help. That does help. I think if it's a pattern that they keep repeating, I have a little less patience with them then. I feel like you should be able to make mistakes, but when somebody comes to you and is like, hey, that didn't work out so well, if you don't invest any research or thinking time or planning time yourself so that in that situation you do something different, then it's okay to get a little bit more aggressive with them than just that. So I think it's definitely possible they could be trying to do the best they can. They have good intentions. But if they're doing exactly the same thing, stereotypical things that happen in meetings, like cutting people off or attributing good ideas to people that didn't actually say them, right? If they're doing that over and over again, then I think you can kind of take it to the next level. I think changing the location works really well also. So in a different meeting room or at a different time of day, or perhaps this discussion would be better handled in a more formal situation or in a less formal situation. Maybe we need a moderator. Maybe we need donuts. But changing something about the situation, I think, is really good. And changing the way feedback can be given. So Angie's example was change the way people talk. So don't talk, use a Google Doc when you have to type, right? Changing something about the way you give feedback. So the time that it's needed, or the way you share it, or different things like that, I think can help that
do
situation.
you publish your circles?
But I don't understand.
Your notes?
Oh, thank you. So I did circle something. You write down your question. Don't lose it. Okay. So I think one of the things that's tricky about that situation is that the people who can be made to feel uncomfortable or are recognizing that something isn't quite right, sometimes aren't the people who have the power to make any change in the thing, right? So you may not be able to decide to bring donuts or to change the room or the thing. Like, you might not be able to do that. Sometimes what happens in situations like that is somebody without the power to change approaches somebody with the power to change. And the person with the power to change will often demand something of the person who's shining a light on something. So they're like, well, make a proposal and then we'll analyze it, on your own time. Or just, tell me what you think I should do. You're like, I don't have the time to explain the last 3 years of the evolution of things to you. So I think the thing that I circled was, it would be nice if somebody in a position to make a change is quite often the person with the least to risk for suggesting that change, and that one of the things that we can do is when we're in positions of power like that, or we could try and talk to some people that might be receptive to this idea, is be like, look, you're the person who can make a change, you're the person least at risk when something goes sideways for this change, you're the person who needs to invest in this and communicate it, not the person who's shining the light, because they have a lot more to lose, even bringing it to the attention of somebody. And so I think that would also be nice if we could kind of include that cultural shift. It doesn't fit in my pattern, right? Because I couldn't figure out how to fit that in, to consider their right, listen, wait, try. I couldn't figure out how to be like, change the system of the world so the people who have the power and at least at risk are the ones who are risking things. I don't know how that fits in, but I think it's important.
Maybe a future thought.
Maybe. Yes, what's your name?
Lee.
Lee.
And what I was going to say, sometimes when I'm going into a situation where I don't know how it's going to go, if I show up early and find my place, I establish myself in the room first. And in your situation where it's the same group of people, if they're like people who go to church and they have their seat, go change someone's seat.
Like sit in their seat.
Shake it up.
Or move the chairs.
Rearrange the table.
I'm gonna write that down as arrive early.
Open the blinds.
Yeah, just do some little environmental change if you can't actually move to a different space. You might be surprised.
Yes, Ian. Please.
I think also mental visualization is very helpful. And I started to do this from when I was young, and I was on a cross-country team, and you mentally visualize the course prior to running. So you expected the hill, and you expected the rocks that might be in the way, and you expected that it might fail, and you expected that it might do something right.
So I can expect to get really pissed off at the person in power in a meeting and plan ahead for how I'm going to visualize their limbs being ripped from them. That wasn't the visualization you were talking about. Go on.
Well, actually, where you essentially visualize 2 or 3 scenarios that can go down here, and actually visualize yourself responding to those scenarios and how you would respond to those, because then you're totally, you at least have somewhere to go that you've already thought of, instead of being caught off guard and not actually having a response.
Right, because you, at the end of the meeting, you'd be like, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No.
Because at the end of the meeting, you're like, oh, I wish I'd have done that differently. Like, I wish I'd responded differently to that. But what you're saying, and I think what I remember from Psych 101 was that your mind doesn't really know whether you actually did this thing or you just thought you did this thing. So that mental practice in my head, okay, so let's go through these scenarios a few times.
Yeah.
You can maybe train yourself how to.
That reminded me of something. I know somebody who puts up signs around them, and one of the signs says, "Turn energy into work." And like, I don't really know why that person hung up that sign, but I, like the specific thing they're trying to change, but I know why they hung it up. They hung it up so they see it all of the time. And they're reminded of it. And I think, like, I could do a similar thing. Like, if I'm going into a meeting and I happen to have my Google Doc or my piece of paper, I could write some things at the top that I want to remember, right? Like, consider, listen, wait, you know, like those things. I can write them down, so they're in front of me. So I'm like, oh, what should I do? And I look down and I'm like, listen, okay, I can listen. I have a friend who's getting a tattoo on her hand, right here, and it's going to be a dot filled in, like probably about, I don't know how big, like the size of a pea, maybe a little smaller, and then underneath of it, a little curved line, like a short curved line, right? And we know what that is, right? What is it? It's a semicolon, right? And when you're writing in English, when do you use semicolons? What does it indicate? A pause, right? So it turns out there's this movement of people getting semicolons tattooed on them because it reminds them that pausing is important for their and the people that they interact with, their mental health. And so literally my friend is going to write down the thing that she wants to remember, which is to pause, right? So I think, you know, visualizing and reminding yourself of the things that are important to you, like putting them somewhere where you see them often can help you remember them. Because sometimes I just forget how to behave appropriately. All right. Well, okay. So that was an hour. So you can tweet at me. I totally do the Twitters. You can use the contact form on my Drupal.org. I'm YesCT. It's up there. And, you know, you make a comment on the Git repo. Like, I'm super open to feedback, but I also want to allow people, like, you know, to do the rest of the camp. So thanks a lot for coming. I really appreciate it.